Okay, Oak Rovers, this is going to be a video that's going to help you with your one-step equation test retake. Now, there's two different types of one-step equation, or I break them down into two different types of problems. The first six, I'm either multiplying my variable by a fraction, like I am in numbers 5 and 6. I'm multiplying my variable by an integer, like I am in 7, 8, and 10. Or I'm dividing my variable by an integer, like I do in problem 9. So let's look at all three of those different types of problems. So let's look at number 5, 5 and 6, where I multiply my variable by a fraction. Now, this is the type of problem I call them reciprocal problems. Basically, when you multiply a fraction by your variable, what you have to do is undo multiplying by that fraction. And the way you do that is by multiplying by the reciprocal. So what is a reciprocal? Reciprocal, you ask. Well, let's look at reciprocals. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. The reciprocal of we'll do negative 1/4 is going to be negative 4/1. The reciprocal of negative 5/8 is going to be negative 8/5. And here's why that these numbers are reciprocals of each other. When I multiply reciprocals by each other, I end up getting 1. So if I multiply 2/3 by 3/2, let's see what happens. Multiplying fractions, they're no problem. Just multiply the top and multiply the bottom. So I go 2 times 3, which is 6, divided by 3 times 2, which is also 6. Well, anytime you have a same numerator and denominator, that makes 1. So 6 divided by 6 is 1. Let's try it on the next one. Negative 1 times negative 4. Remember, a negative times a negative is positive, so that's positive 4. 4 times 1, that's also 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So it's kind of cool. Let's try the last one. When I multiply the reciprocals together, negative 5 times negative 8 is 40, because a negative times a negative is positive, and 8 times 5 is also 40, and 40 divided by 40 is also equal to 1. So the cool thing in math is if I multiply by reciprocals, I end up getting 1. So what I'm going to do to the fraction that's multiplied by the variable is multiply by the reciprocal, because then what I'm going to get is 1x. And that's what I want to have for these problems. So let's look at number 5. I'm multiplying x by a fraction. So I'm going to multiply 1/5 by the reciprocal of 1/5. Well, the reciprocal of 1/5 is just 5. 5/1 or 5. Now let's see what happens. When I multiply this, I get 5 times 1, which is 5, and 1 times 5, which is 5. 5 divided by 5 is just 1x. But if I multiply the one side by 5, to keep the equation balanced, I have to multiply the other side by 5 also. So negative 4 times 5 is going to be negative 20. And that's how I did that problem. I'm not going to go through all those really that slowly again. I just wanted to show you, kind of explain mathematically what's happening. Now the next one, I'm multiplying x by a fraction, so I've got to multiply by that reciprocal. Whenever I multiply a variable by a fraction, to undo that, I multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of negative 1/6 is negative 6/1, which is the same as negative 6. But if I multiply this side by negative 6, I also have to multiply that side by negative 6. Negative 6 times negative 1 is positive 6. Positive 6 divided by positive 6 is positive 1. So I have positive 1x, which I write down just as x, and negative 8 times negative 6, which is positive 48. And that's how I do the reciprocal problems, or the problems where I multiply a fraction by the variable. Now, on 7, 8, and 10, these are a little bit easier. Those first ones are probably the most difficult ones we had. On these, I'm just multiplying x by an integer. To undo multiplying, you divide. So to undo multiplying by negative 3, I divide by negative 3. But to keep the equation balanced, I've got to divide by negative 3 on the other side. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is just 1. So I'm left with 1x. On the other side, negative 24 divided by negative 3 is positive 8 because a negative divided by a negative is positive. Now guys, I need you to show these things. I need you to show that you're dividing both sides by negative 3, or multiplying both sides by negative 6, or multiplying both sides by 5. That's the idea of these whole problems. You have to show what you do to one side, you're undoing on the other side. And that's why you're able to solve for x. Let's just do number 9, because you can probably do number 8 and 10 are the exact same type of problems as number 7. So let's look at number 9 and see what we're doing here. On number 9, I have my variable x, and I'm dividing by negative 4. Well, I have to think, what's the opposite of dividing by negative 4? Or how do I undo dividing by negative 4? Well, to undo dividing, I multiply. So to undo dividing by negative 4, I have to multiply by negative 4. But if I do it to one side, I also have to do it to the other side. So negative 4 times x divided by negative 4 is just going to be x on that side. On the other side, negative 9 times negative 4 is going to be a positive 36. Because remember, when you multiply or divide, a negative multiplied by negative or negative divided by negative, I always get a positive answer. When the signs are different, I get a negative answer. Okay, that's the first 6 problems. They're all kind of like that. And those are the ones I think most people struggle with. On the other ones, they're just one step. And what I do, where the side of the variable, I create a 0 with that variable. So I'm just left with the variable on the one side of the equation. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side to keep it balanced. And that's why I solve for x. So here's my variable. I've got to create a 0 with my x. Well, I have a negative 17. To create a 0, it's positive 17. But if I have a positive 17 there, I have to keep it balanced, so I have a positive 17 there. My positive and negative 17 created a 0, so that's gone. When I create a 0, that's not there anymore. So the left side, I just have x. On the right side, I have 21 and 17. They're both positive, so I'm just adding or combining two positive numbers, which is going to be 38. So x is equal to 38. Okay? The next one, I've got to create a 0 with my variable. Now I have an x, a negative 11, and a negative 42. To create a 0 with this negative 11, I've got to add 11. But if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side also. Now on the left side of the equation, I have x, negative 11, and positive 11. My negative 11 and positive 11 created a 0, so they're gone. So all I have left is just x on the left side. On the right side, I have 42 negatives and 11 positives. I have to combine them and see what I have. Well, the signs work against each other, and I have more negatives than positives. So since the signs work against each other, my answer has to be negative. And I have to figure out how many more negatives I have than positives. So I subtract 42 minus 11, and I get 31. So my answer for that one is negative 31. Okay? And this is the way most of those problems are. Let me see if I have something here that's a little bit different. Okay, let's look at the next one. This will be the last one I kind of do for you. And then I'll have you guys start up on your one-step test. So if I have this one, I have a positive x, positive 34, and a positive 51. I've got to get rid of this. I got to create a 0 with my positive 34. I do that with a negative 34. But if there's a negative 34 on that side of the equation, I've got to keep it balanced by combining a negative 34 over there. On my positive and negative 34, that's just creating a 0. They're going to be gone with each other because 0, a positive 34, negative 34, they just cancel each other out. So on the right side, I just have x. On the left side, I have positive 51 and negative 34. Well, I say they work against each other. There's more positives than negatives. So what I would do is I'd have positive 51 I can think of as 34 positives and 17 more positives. So basically what I'm doing is, since I have more positives than negatives, I know my answer has to be positive. Since they work against each other, I have to subtract. Now I think it's a good idea to write these down. at a different place, because you can't use a calculator for this one. Because a lot of people, what they like to do is they like to go, oh, 4 minus 1 is 3, and then 5 minus 3 is 2. And the answer isn't that. It's not 23. What you have to do is you have to take 4 away from 1. And I can't take 4 away from 1, so I have to borrow from the tens. So I'm going to have 40 left over, and that 10 I borrowed with the 1 makes 11. 11 minus 4 is 7. 4 minus 3 is 1. So my answer for this problem is positive 17. So x is equal to positive 17. And that's a video on one-step equations. You can watch this video as you're doing the test or redo it anytime you need to. But this is a video basically on how you do these problems. Hopefully this helped, and good luck on your test.